If you've downloaded your drivers and you have your Babyface Pro connected to your computer or laptop and you're looking for a quick start guide on getting up and running as quickly as possible, look no further. This is the video for you. Stay tuned. To get started, let's connect the USB cable on the left side, our studio monitors in the back, as well as any microphone inputs. Over on the right, we can connect our guitar or other line sources. Before we look at Totalmix, let's look at how to get around on the unit itself. Over on the right-hand side, we can look at all of our outputs, channel 1 and 2, headphones, and optical. By simply toggling this out button, I can choose which output I'm looking at and those outputs that I want to control the volume. For example, select channel 1 and 2 and move the encoder knob to change the volume of your studio monitors. If I wanted to change the volume of my headphones, I can do the exact same thing, all on the Babyface. Over on the left-hand side, I can choose which inputs I want to see on the meters. By simply toggling the in button, this will show me my levels directly on the Babyface. There are other functions that can be accomplished with these buttons. However, for this quick start video, these will be the most common uses of the in and out buttons. Another feature you will want to use right away is the dim feature. This corresponds to the main output assignment in Totalmix. By simply pressing this, you can attenuate your output. You will see the LEDs come on, and the default setting in Totalmix is -20 dB. If you want to change this, you can do this in the Totalmix settings. Okay, let's talk about Totalmix. First thing you're going to want to do is open up the software, which is installed along with the driver, and it's down on the task tray. You'll also have your Fireface USB settings for setting your sample rate. And if you're using the digital I/O, you can set the clock source to internal or digital. On the Mac, we will open up Audio MIDI Setup and choose the Babyface to be our audio interface for internal sounds and other things. And this is how iTunes, Windows Media Player, Facebook Live, YouTube audio will come into Totalmix. Now let me explain the Totalmix interface so it's simple. There are several videos about Totalmix that go in depth. The purpose of today's video is to do a quick start guide, get you recording as quickly as possible. The top row is your hardware inputs. So my analog 1 input that I've connected my microphone, I already see my level. The middle row is software playback. This is where all of my software audio will show up. So that would include my DAW, that would include iTunes or Windows Media Player or any audio from websites. Depending on the software that you use, you might be able to route it into various faders of this mixer, but most of the time it'll be right here in this first fader. The bottom row is all of your hardware outputs. So I have audio going out, my physical analog 1 and 2 to my studio monitors, and my headphone out on the side of the Babyface so I can hear it in my headphones. This is where my digital outs are as well. The first thing you're going to want to do is use the control room feature, because there are certain functions that are accessible when your outputs are in the control room versus over here on the left. So I recommend you hit the assign button and set your main out for your studio monitors and your headphone out to the phones. And you notice that the analog 1 and 2 and headphone outs immediately came over to the control room section. And that's where the dim function and some of the other features for talkback and stuff are here. So that's why we like to do this. And it will always come up this way moving forward. You only have to make this setting one time. The other thing I want to point out in the top row is sometimes the audio can be made stereo. And you can separate what is mono and what is stereo. I like to have my analog inputs separate. The same is true for instruments 3 and 4. So I separate them so I can see my analog inputs all separately, and then my digital inputs are all set up in stereo. On the input section, you have your EQ and where you turn on your gain and your phantom power. So this is where I have enacted some gain for my microphone. If I was using a condenser mic, I would push the phantom power button here. If I wanted to add EQ, I can simply do that and turn on the EQ. I'm going to elect to leave that off. So that is what I do in the top row. In the bottom row, you click on an output, and based on which output is highlighted, that is the output that you will be routing audio to. So if you want to hear your microphone in your headphones, you would click on the phones and bring up the fader. If I want to change the audio level going to my main out, I highlight the main out and bring up the fader. So if I had another instrument connected on input 3 and I wanted to hear it in the headphones, simply click on the phones and bring up the fader. And that's how I route instrument 3 to the phones. If I want to hear the instrument through my studio monitors, I highlight the main and bring up the instrument. That's how I do it. So that's a quick start on how to use Totalmix so that you can hear audio. Now, what about recording? You would open up your DAW and select one of these inputs for a track. Now, every DAW is different. I'm going to open up Reaper. This is true for Pro Tools and all kinds of other applications. So they're all a little different, but the basic premise is the same. So I'll just choose New Project, and I will insert a new track. And in this particular DAW, I select the input here. So I'm going to choose Mic 1. And I'll arm the track, and now my DAW right here is getting audio from this input. Now here's what you need to understand. In Totalmix, the bottom row is physical outputs, what we're hearing, but the DAW is only looking at the top row. So the only source and control of the audio level going into the DAW is going to be the gain. So I'll just move this over to the right so you can see it, and I can control the gain by simply bringing it up and down. Test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2. Of course, it's affecting what you all hear as well. So this goes right to the DAW. If you're using EQ, you're only hearing the EQ in the actual output, but you're not recording the EQ unless you choose to record EQ in your Fireface settings. EQ for record. As soon as I check that, the EQ that you enable here will be captured in the DAW. Now let's say we record a track. So we're going to go ahead and record. Test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2. Now the DAW is software, so it's going to feed the middle row. Going back to the beginning, I will see audio in the middle row. Now, if you're not hearing that audio, you need to bring it up. So I click on the phones, the fader is up for that software. If I want to hear it in the studio monitor, now you'll hear it. Test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2. And that is how I have software coming out of my DAW into my headphones or my main out. If I need to route audio to one of my digital outs, I simply click on one of those digital outs and bring up that audio, and that's how I can get it to go wherever I want. Over to the right, you have effects. You can click on your effects by clicking this button. You also can click it here. The other thing I want to show you is you have a names button. You can rename these channels whatever you want. So you just click on right in the text and you can type a name. But if you ever wanted to get the default names, you simply click the names. That way you know what input is what. And I've already named my software playback channels because the software playback channels follow the same naming convention as the physical inputs and outputs. And for some people that's confusing, so I like to customize these and just call it soft 1 and 2, software 3 and 4. And in my DAW and certain programs, I will be able to route the audio to these other channels. On a Mac, most of the system sounds and all of that will always go to the first 2 channels. Now over on the right, if we want to hear effects, we simply turn on the effects here, and there is an aux send on the channel. So I can send audio to my effects right here, or if I want to, I can use the effects send knob and it tells me what the numeric value is. I typically just use this tiny fader, and I can see that I have audio coming in. If I want to hear it, I click on which output I want to hear that effect and bring up the effects return. So if I want to hear it in my headphones, I can also hear it as well. If I want to turn off the echo and just have the reverb, now this reverb setting is not that obvious, so let's choose a different preset. Maybe slapback. Test 1 2. And I can always turn it off. I also can bring down the aux return. And that's for monitoring and adding effects on your vocals or your inputs while you're recording. You can record effects by creating a mix in one of the unused outputs and using the loopback feature. But we have other videos on loopback, so I'm not going to get into loopback today. This is more about just getting up and running. And I can always close the effects panel here. I have snapshots, so I can save mixes of what the actual settings of the mixer is using snapshots. I have groups, so if I want to create solo or fader groups, so I'm moving one fader with the mouse and it moves several, I can certainly do that by just hitting edit, choosing a button, and clicking on the faders that I want to group, and then I simply hit the edit button, and there it is. And then when I hit the button there, I can bring all these up together. Of course, if I want to clear it, I just do that. In addition to groups, I have layouts. Layouts are simply the ability to make this GUI that you're looking at look the way I want it to look. If I don't want to see inputs and outputs that I'm not using, I can simplify my interface by going up to Options, Channel Layout, and I can hide my input faders, my playback faders, and my output faders however I see fit. So for example, if I'm only using analog inputs and outputs and I'm never going to use the digital inputs and outputs, I can click on the Input tab, highlight these faders, and hide them. I can do the same for the outputs. And by doing that, I have now reduced the clutter on my window, and I can save this as a layout. And then I can change layouts depending on what I'm doing. I also have a W key on my keyboard, and these are called workspaces, and I can quickly select different workspaces that I always use depending on when I'm recording and mixing. I have set up a few for myself, so I will use my default home studio setup and hit load. And by doing that, that brings up a setup that I'm comfortable with for how I work all the time. And you can customize this. Now, what is the difference between snapshot, layouts, and workspaces? The difference is this. A workspace is both the layout and the mixer settings, everything, the names, what I've named the fader, exactly which windows I want open when I start recording. Snapshots are just the mixer settings, and layout is just the physical view of what you're seeing. So that is a quick tour of Totalmix. I hope this has been helpful. If you'd like more information, simply visit us at rmeusa.com, and you can send us an email through the support tab. Thanks for watching.